Welcome to the Boys Tournament Tip-Off Show presented by Current Electric. I am Mike McGivern. Thank you so much for joining us. So the next 2 days at the Kohl Center in Madison, we will crown 5 state champions, from small schools to large schools, with teams from all over the state of Wisconsin. Looking at this year's field, there are teams that you thought at the start of the season had a really good chance to possibly get to Madison. Teams like Wisconsin Lutheran in Division I, Slinger in Division III, and Milwaukee Juneau in Division IV. But this year, like most years, there are a number of teams that step up and surprise guys like me. Teams like McFarland in Division II, Saint Croix Central in Division III, and Cambridge in Division IV. And speaking of the Blue Jays from Cambridge, this is the first time they've ever made it up to state. And when you talk to Coach Alex Rainey, talks a lot about, even he was surprised how this young team responded to the pressure and just continued to make big plays down the stretch of their season. It's a great story. So for the next 3 days, we can sit back and enjoy this for what it is. It's a chance to watch some really good high school basketball and be proud of these student athletes from all over the state of Wisconsin that wear the name of their schools and sometimes the name of their towns and cities on the front of their jerseys. Win or lose, these family schools, communities will talk about the 2026 WIAA State Basketball Championships for years to come. So for the next hour, we're going to break down the 4 state semifinal games going on today. Tip off at 1:35 right here on My24 for the first Division III game. The number 1 ranked team, the Thunder from Seymour, takes on the number 4 ranked team, the Saint Croix Central Panthers, followed by the L-Cats from Lake Mills taking on the Angels from Racine St. Catharines. And then later this evening, again right here on My24, the Division IV games tip off at 6:30 with the number 1 ranked Bonduel Bears take on Cambridge, followed by Milwaukee Juneau taking on the Ramblers from Eau Claire, Regis. Let me introduce my co-host for today and tomorrow's preview show. He is Chuck Freimund, KFIZ Sports Director, and he's on Football Friday nights on Fox Sports 920 and the statewide network. Chuck, how you been?
Mike, it's great to be here. What a fantastic time. The small communities, this is where everybody comes invested. And you're right, these next 3 days, fantastic.
Chuck, you and I know, we've been friends for a really long time, and we worked together. If we saw each other in the hallway, it was normally a 30-minute conversation surrounding high school athletics. And I love the fact that your passion for high school athletics matches mine, and I thank you for that. Hey, a question for you. When we talk about some of these teams and these programs, and you talk about a program like Wisconsin Lutheran or De Pere, these are true programs that have continued to build over the years. I want to ask you about an area that you're very familiar with, Lemira. Something's happened there. You know, 4 or 5 years ago, we didn't talk about Lemira with sports in athletics. I mean, there wasn't a sport going on in that building that we talked much about, and something has changed in that building. And all of a sudden, you basketball and football, a number of sports they're doing really well with.
And I think what happened, 2024, they won the state championship in football, and all of a sudden you get that winning culture going, and people are believing in themselves. Why not us? Why do we got to be 2-23? They've turned things around. They got a good group of kids, parents, coaches, and you get that ball rolling a little bit and you have success. And I think they're going to have younger kids, the youth program. So they've turned things around and they're going to be good for years to come.
Look, you've been in and around high school athletics for a long time, and I think we agree with this, that when one team sees that success, all of a sudden everybody else spends a little bit more time in the weight room, a little bit more time on the field, in the gym, right? Because they want that parade. They want that pep rally. They want a day off of school to be able to go to a state semifinal or a state final. And I think that really kind of rises all boats.
Sure. And what's great is this time of year, especially in some of these smaller communities like that, is the fire trucks that are leading these kids out of town on their way to state. They walk through the school, the grade schools, and the kids in the grade schools are giving these kids high fives and all that. They're gods for a week and for their careers. And then when they leave this, they go on to college or they go on to their the business world or whatever they're going to do in life. But that's the great thing. For right now, these kids are stars in their community.
Hey, Chuck, I always coached in this area, in the Milwaukee area. And I always watch a movie like Hoosiers and
Yep.
think, can you imagine what it would be like in one of these small communities where it's a one school community?
Mhm.
And if you get to state, look, I coached against Oostburg, right? And I saw there were so many people that didn't have a dog in the fight, but they lived in that community and wanted to support that team. Have you ever coached in that kind of community?
Yeah, I've seen it in Lamira. There were people at the sectional final on Saturday night and the semifinals in Portage on last Wednesday. I haven't seen some of those people in 30 years. And they're like, we got to get out and support this team.
I love that.
Everybody starts talking about it. Everybody, and the bandwagon is plenty open there for everybody. Oh, I haven't been to a game in 25 years. Come on out.
Right.
You know, that's the great thing about the communities.
You know, I agree. And I think that's what high school athletics does, right? It brings your community together, good or bad. And when you think about some of the smaller communities and you go to the barber shop or you go to the coffee shop,
Sure.
and all the guys my age are
Yep.
going, like, I'm a really much better coach now that I'm retired,
Yep.
sitting up in the stands than I think I was when I was on the bench. But you go into those communities and
Yeah.
that's what these guys talk about on Monday morning.
Like, how about Reedsville? They have not been to state since 1946.
Right.
They've had some good teams, and some of these other schools haven't been. McFarland won state championships in the early 70s, have not been back. And they're going back, and it's just they're breaking the door down and finally going back. And that's a special thing, too.
Yeah, the Reedsville story is great. We're going to get to that
Yep.
when we talk about Reedsville for sure. We're going to get to a break. Other side of the break, we will break down our first Division III matchup. This is the Boys Tournament Tip-Off Show presented by our friends at Current Electric, only on My24. Welcome back to the Boys Tournament Tip-Off Show presented by Current Electric. I'm Mike McGivern. Alongside my co-host for the entire hour, he's Chuck Freimund. He's the KFIZ Sports Director, and he's on Football Friday nights on Fox Sports 920. Tip-off for the first state semifinal in Division III is at 1:30 as number 1 Seymour takes on number 4 Saint Croix Central, followed by Lake Mills against Racine St. Catharines. Chuck, let's break down the first matchup. Number 1 ranked team, the Seymour Thunder, 27-1 overall, 16-0 in the Bay Conference. Let's listen to Coach Bobby Kucha talk a little bit about this year's team.
We all knew we were going to have a really good team. A lot of guys back from last year. Our top 7 guys are all back, and everybody gets a little bit stronger physically, mentally, and then they all get better skill wise. So it's a fun combination to have. But you're right. We just took it game by game. When we had our preseason meeting, we talked to the guys, and we could start the season 0-5 with the schedule we put together, and they kept responding, kept finding a way to win, and kept working one game at a time. And we ended up losing the last game of the regular season, but I think that might have been good for us to show we're not invincible and relieve any pressure of being an undefeated team.
You know, Chuck, Bobby is an alumni of Seymour, played under Hall of Fame coach John Murphy. And he was asked, how much do you use? How much do you continue to do some of the same things he did? And he said quite a bit. He said, I think we've changed a little bit on the defensive side, but it's still here at Seymour, if you're going to be on the floor, you've got to be able to score. And we want 5 guys on the floor that are able to score. He said, but utilizing the same stuff that Coach Murphy has been really good for them. First time they've been back to state since 2011.
Yeah, and Murphy had a great run there, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
I mean, he was winning games. He was going this. When you went to northeastern Wisconsin, you knew about the Seymour Thunder. You'd go into town there and you saw signs and all that and all the state championships they won. A lot of talent going through. Good to see them back.
Yeah, I agree with that. And he said, look, this isn't going to be a one and done. He said, I think our program is back. And he said, look, like back when Coach Murphy had it going, you wanted to have this consistent, right? You want that program to be in the conversation to get to state every year. And he feels like they're at that point at Seymour. They're playing against Saint Croix Central. And Coach Matt Bailey talked a little bit about this year's team.
You know, in our success is when we have balance. You know, we look at our stat sheet. We don't put a ton of emphasis on points, but we just look at balance and are we getting contribution from 6, 7 guys, or are we getting it from 1 or 2? And when everybody's contributing, whether it be points, rebounds, whatever the stat is, that seems to be when we win and when we play well. Last night, our leading scorer had 13 points, and we had a bunch of guys between 7 and 13, and that's when we're at our best. When we have one guy score 25 and everybody else is 5, 6, that's usually a bad recipe for us.
Chuck, that it's an interesting concept. And he said that a couple of times in that press conference, that if we're balanced, and their 3 leading average scorers, 14, 13, and 12. And he said, look, I think that gives us an advantage because you can't take away one and expect to beat us, because we've got other guys that can score. The other thing he talked a lot about, and you're going to hear this a lot through the next 2 days, when we ask in those press conferences what the turning point was, a lot of these coaches go back to losses. And I, as a basketball coach, and I think you were the same, if you learn something from a loss, it's not such a bad loss. But if it's just a loss and you move on and think, well, that's not going to happen again, that's where you get into some trouble. And when he talked, and a number of these coaches talked about certain parts of the season where they lost a tough game, but what they learned from it, I think it's really interesting. You'll hear that a lot through the next 2 days.
First of all, Coach won the day when he had the deer head on the wall.
There you go.
Number one. He's won the day. He's won this show so far. But you're right. Sometimes coaches will say, well, we don't want to lose games. But, maybe that loss was good for us, maybe an attitude adjustment or whatever. But, or they turned things around, or we saw certain things that they needed to do in that game. They got an athletic turnaround there. They play in one of the tougher, smaller school conferences in the state. That middle border conference is really, really good. They've changed it over the years, but that is a tough conference, that middle border.
The other thing that you'll hear a lot in the next 2 days is they beat Osceola in the state sectional finals. They had split with them in the regular season. Or you're going to hear a couple of times where we're a team that had lost twice, but then beat somebody in the sectional final. And that cliche about, can you beat somebody 3 times? I always thought that was nonsense, but it seemed to come through a couple of times in some of the teams and the games we'll talk about this year.
And the team they're playing, Seymour, we just talked about, they had to beat Xavier a 3rd time. They beat them twice in conference play, and they came back and beat them in the sectional.
Yeah, they really did. St. Croix Central, and listen to Matt Bailey. Another thing that you'll hear a lot through the next 2 days is this is a senior-led team, and these kids have played together since 3rd grade. And when you
another great story.
Yeah, when you talked about Lamira in the youth program, that's what happens then. You start getting some success like Saint Croix Central is getting. Now, all of a sudden, these kids want to be a part of that. They see these senior players at the local grocery store, and they're like asking them for autographs. They come to the games, and now they want to be part of that, and that's how these things start.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And sometimes it does materialize, and they win sectionals, and they go to state. Sometimes you might have a really good 2nd or 3rd grade class, and by the time they become seniors, there's one kid left for whatever reason. But in this case, and there's a lot of these schools where they just play and they advance, and they target this school, or they target maybe their junior or senior years. And the same thing with St. Croix Central. There's a number of stories like that, and they're one of them.
Yeah, and when he talks about senior-led, I think they have 6 or 7 seniors on that team. And that's something you don't see much anymore either. I know the last couple of years when I was still coaching, it was difficult on cut day to tell a senior, look, we're going to either keep you or we're not going to keep you, because you're not going to get a lot of playing time. That last year at Greendale Martin Luther, for me, we had two kids that we were going to cut. We're going to keep 12, and 2 seniors, individual, right? They would come in by themselves to Coach Wallersheim's office, and both of them said, look, if you keep me, I promise I'll never complain about playing time, and I will practice hard and make the starters better. We feel like something special is going on. We want to be a part of it, which you don't hear that a lot. If you see a team that has 6, 7, maybe 8 seniors, it's something you just don't see a lot nowadays.
And there's sometimes where a kid will say, if he's a senior and he doesn't see he's going to get a lot of playing time, there's a talented junior class coming up, he might say, well, I'm just not going to play. But that was a great situation right there where he said, well, you know what? I want to see it. I want to finish out my career here. I want to be a part of this. I'll possibly go in the state. I know I might not play, but I'm going to do whatever it takes to get our team to state.
Well, the fact that Seymour is back, Saint Croix Central is going to be there again. Certainly congratulations to those programs. We're going to get to a break. Other side of the break, we will break down the second Division III matchup. This is the boys tournament tip-off show presented by Current Electric, only on My24. Welcome back to the boys tournament tip-off show presented by Current Electric. I'm Mike McGivern. Alongside my co-host, he's Chuck Freimund, KFIZ sports director and Football Friday nights on Fox Sports 920 and a statewide network. Tip-off is right around the corner for the first state semifinal in Division III as Seymour takes on Saint Croix Central. The second matchup in Division III features the L-Cats from Lake Mills taking on the Angels from Racine St. Catharines. Let's start with the L-Cats from Lake Mills. 26-2 overall, undefeated in the Capital North Conference, and coached by Steve Hicklin, his 14th year as the head coach at Lake Mills. Let's listen to Coach Hicklin talk about this year's team.
I don't think we went in thinking we were going to go undefeated. I never try to make our schedule so that we'll be undefeated either. You know, I think you want to play the best teams you can find and test your team. And if you're fortunate to win a lot of those games, you're going to get a really good seed as a result too. So that's kind of the journey we were on. Our conference was tough this year with Lakeside Lutheran and West Ron his senior year, and Columbus and Lodi had very experienced groups too. So we played a lot of good teams, and Freedom and Seymour were the two that we lost, but learned a ton from those games too. That'll serve us well on Thursday, I'm sure.
You know, Chuck, I've known Coach Hicklin a long time, and I'm a big fan of his. I think he does things the right way. One thing about the L-Cats is nobody can tell me what an L-Cat is. I've asked a bunch of people, and they're like, we don't really know. The mighty L-Cats.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. But I know that his program, for years, you know, people thought Lakeside Lutheran was the team there.
Correct.
But now the L-Cats are saying, hey, what about us?
Yeah,
We're
100%.
We're coming on strong.
And that rivalry, because they're across the street from each other pretty much, and it's the private school against the public school, and they don't really like each other much. And every time they play against each other, that game is sold out. He had talked a couple of times in that press conference about Lamont Hamilton from Racine St. Catharines. We'll get to him when we break them down, but he kept saying, look, that young man's going to be a problem. He's going to be a problem for us. We're going to have to make sure defensively we always know where he is on the floor. They had to replace 3 starters from the team that got to state last year. Went undefeated a year ago in that conference and then did that again this year after replacing 3 starters. I think that tells you a lot about that program.
It does. I was unsure whether the L-Cats Lake Mills were going to be back because of what they had to replace off last year's team. But you're right. It's a sign of a good program, a solid program, when you could graduate a talented class like that and have guys pushing up, and now it's their time.
Yeah, Tyler Wallen is a 6'3" forward, averaging 18 points a game. And Coach Hicklin talked a lot about how this kid has matured from the first game to now, and being a real leader on that team and being a kid that they can really trust with his hands on the ball down the stretch of games.
Yeah, he's a kid who we've heard about for a couple of years now. Really, really solid. And I think they're going to give St. Cat's a game. I really do. I love he's a terrific coach as well. He's been there. He's not one of these guys who just came there for a couple of years and was looking on to move to a bigger school. He's built something there at Lake Mills.
Yeah, Brady Benish is a 6'1" senior guard, averaging just under 15 a game. Another kid who has been through the wars with them. And he talked a lot about the leadership that they have on this team after losing those starters, that these kids, as soon as the season ended last year, the upperclassmen were getting kids together in the gym, in the weight room, making sure that they got back to this point. And now let's see if we can take it one more. He also talked about Jenner Wellman. He said, look, this kid looks like a freshman, looks like he's 13 years old. And he's not going to scare anybody walking into the gym. And then you get him on the floor, and he's got a high basketball IQ. The lights have not been too bright for this kid. He's made some big plays down the stretch, but he's a kind of kid that you don't really notice a lot because he just looks like he's 13 years old. But boy, he said on the floor, he makes big play after big play, defends really well. And he said he's going to grow a little bit, get a little stronger. He's going to be a kid that in our conference, you're going to hear the name a lot. But right now, when you see him on My24, you're going to think, how old is he? Is he a 7th grader? He said, but boy, he's a good basketball player.
You know, it's amazing how you can get, by playing smart basketball, high basketball IQ, and you might look like you're 13, but you could do a lot of things out there
Right.
if you know how to play the game.
And in today's world, you're playing a lot of AAU basketball.
Yep.
So you're playing, throughout the summer against some really good competition.
Sure.
That idea of being so nervous playing against a kid that you've read about online, I think those days, for the most part, are over.
Yeah,
Chuck.
and I think the days of a freshman playing on varsity basketball, it's a cool thing, but it's not as like it was maybe 25 years ago where, man, this freshman's on varsity.
Right.
How is he on varsity? Because you're right, because of AAU, they all play together.
Correct. Or play against each other
Against
for
each
sure.
other, yes.
Hey, they're going to play Racine St. Catherine's, and it's a program that both of us are very familiar with. We've had a great year, 23-4 overall, 11-3 in a very tough Metro Classic Conference, coached by Ryan Thompson. Let's hear a little bit from Coach Thompson about this year's Angels team.
A lot of the coaches are real competitive, experienced coaches. One of those conferences, you can't overlook anybody from night to night. Everybody's smart. Again, a lot of experience. We got knocked off by Martin Luther early in the year, right after we had beat Racine Lutheran. So you go through those things, but even in the disappointments, if you lose, you learn lessons along the way. And that's what's so nice about, being a senior-led team. They've been through these things.
Chuck, he talked about being a senior-led team, and they really are. Starts with Lamont Hamilton, 6-foot senior guard, averaging 26 points a game, and he's going to Minnesota on a football scholarship. They have 6 players on their basketball team that all play football. In fact, E.J. Vincent, who is a 5'10 senior guard, is averaging 12 a game. He's going to UW Stout to play football. And he said, look, the toughness that these guys got from playing football, they're carrying over onto the basketball court.
Oh, sure. And St. Catherine's had a great run in football as of late. And you hadn't seen that a lot in the past for football guys on the basketball court playing basketball. St. Catherine's largely known as being a basketball school, as you know, under Coach Lesh all those years.
Sure.
But, they have athletes. I just look at St. Catherine's and I have great athletes on the court. And very talented athletes who could play any sport.
Right. And Lamont Hamilton, I've seen him play since his freshman year. He's quick as a hiccup, makes great decisions on the floor. And when the team needs him to get to the basket or to hit a three or to get a steal, he's that kid that always seems to get the engine going a little bit.
And plus that conference they play in, Coach McGivern, what a conference they play in.
We talked about that before we started recording, and I can tell you that it is a conference with some of the best coaches in the state of Wisconsin. When the guys come in, like Nick Ford, who came from Fond du Lac to Dominican, if you're not familiar with that conference, you think, well, there's just Division III, Division IV schools, I think we'll be okay. Boy, it bites you pretty quick because you realize how really well coached some of these teams are.
And that conference really reminds me of the old Metro Conference.
Very much so.
There's never a night off. Not that there's not off at any conference, but, man, that conference, every night, man, you're facing good coaching and solid, well-coached kids.
It's interesting. St. Catherine's had to beat Racine Lutheran, and they had split with them throughout the year and then beat a really good Oosper team to get there. And I think when people were looking at that sectional, they were thinking Racine Lutheran, the Petroff kids, really good. They had a great year, won the conference. And I had people coming to me saying, look, I don't know if anybody can beat Wisconsin Lutheran in Division I, and I'm not sure anybody can beat Racine Lutheran in Division III, and Racine St. Catherine's went and got him.
Although, Mike, I had Oosburg winning that sectional.
You did.
I saw Oosburg play earlier this year, and they have 2 kids who are just phenomenal. I saw them wipe out Lomira in a game, hand them one of their 2 losses. And St. Catherine's took care of them pretty well in that sectional. So St. Catherine's is on its way, but I had Oosburg winning that sectional.
Well, we talked about Lomira's programs.
Yep.
Look at the boys team and the girls team at Oosburg.
Oh, God, yeah.
Right? And look at Whitefish Bay as well, and we'll get to them tomorrow. But I'll tell you what, it's kind of cool when the girls team does really well and the boys team, and they support each other. But St. Catherine's, had a great run and continues to have a good run. It's going to be such a good game when they play Lake Mills. Last thing about St. Catherine's, you and I agree that gym, I don't know what it's like to coach in Indiana basketball,
Yep.
but that's got to be as close to what it's like where they pack that
Sunk in.
place.
Yeah.
And people are yelling at you from in the back up top. And I just loved coaching in that gym.
Yeah, I think Milwaukee Juneau kind of plays in the same kind of venue from what I've seen on tape. I think that's kind of the same way. But I was like surprised. I was like, Racine St. Catherine still plays in an old school Hoosiers type gym.
Yeah, the Coach McGuire Gymnasium, the
Yeah.
Coach Letch floor. It
Yeah.
yeah. I have to tell you, with the Metro, the Mesmer background, and where I coach, kind of rooting a little bit. And don't tell the boys, the L-Cats, this kind of rooting for the Angels from St. Catherine.
Well, like I was telling you about the Metro Conference. You can never go wrong with the Metro. To me, that still is the best conference that's ever been built in the state.
Man, I love you for saying that. We're going to get to a break. Other side of the break, we're going to break down the 2 Division IV matchups coming up 6:30 here, right here on My24. This is the Boys Tournament Tip-Off Show presented by Current Electric, only on My24. Welcome back to the Boys Tournament Tip-Off Show presented by Current Electric, only on My24. I'm Mike McGivern alongside my co-host. He is Chuck Freimund, KFIZ Sports Director and Football Friday nights on Fox Sports 920. Hey, Chuck, let's look at tonight's Division IV matchup. First game, number 1 ranked Bonduel against Cambridge, followed by Milwaukee Juneau and Regis. Let's start with the Bears from Bonduel. 25-3 overall, went unbeaten, and won the Central Wisconsin East Conference. They are coached by Duke Kopp. During the press conference, Duke talked about Western Michigan football recruit Ryan Westrich and the difference in his game after he got in the weight room a little bit.
He started for us as a freshman, and he was a big kid then, but he has put on a lot of muscle. And the thing about him is he just works so hard. He's one of our better athletes. He's going to Western Michigan to play football, and when we're conditioning, he's leading the sprints and all that kind of thing. He's the nicest kid you'll ever want to see and meet. But he's developed his game. He's a power player, and he takes care of the middle for us.
Coach Chuck, Coach Kopp talked a lot about it took us a while to get there, and now it's the second year in a row. And he said, look, it took us too many years to get here, and now that it's the second year in a row, we've had to play a little bit different because all of a sudden now we're being hunted. And we're not the hunters anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We're the team that everybody's trying to beat. And we had this in the beginning of the year. We wanted these players on this year's team to create their own story. And we've continued to use that line throughout the year. Look, it's important for us to create our own story. We're not last year's team.
No.
It's a whole different team.
Yeah, they went to the state finals last year, got beaten at finals game. And by the way, they're moving up to Division III next year. So this is their last shot at Division IV here.
Right.
So they're moving up to Division III, but their starting 5 is really good. Their starting 5 is really good. And this kid, Westrich, is going to Western Michigan, solid, strong kid. And when you got one of those kind of kids in Division IV, you could do a lot of things.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, as we had talked about a couple segments ago, and we're going to hear this throughout, in that press conference, most of these coaches got asked, was there a turning point? And again, Duke Kopp talked about losing February 2nd. They lost to Brilliant, and then February 2nd at Kewanee, and they haven't lost since. And they said, look, when we lost to Brilliant, who's one of the best teams in the state by 2, he said, our players said, look, we can compete with these guys. This is a team that's got a chance. And since February 2nd, they have not lost.
Don't you feel like every team not every team, but most teams that once they go to state, you always face a little adversity, right?
Correct.
Whether it's a little skid, you have a couple of injuries or whatever. I feel like every one of these teams we talk about has some point in the season where they go through a little adversity and then they bounce back, and this is why they're here.
Yeah, 100%. And when he talked a little bit about some of the leaders on that team, after that Brilliant loss on the bus ride home, saying, guys, we're as good as anybody in the state, and we got to start to show it. And since February 2nd, they have been undefeated. And Coach Kopp said, look, we're playing at a really high level right now. hopefully we can carry it over. The difference between being there the second year too, kind of knowing where the locker room is, what time you have to be there, kind of the template, where we're going to eat prior to the game is all set for you. And I think that's a big advantage.
Yeah, and they got the number 1 seed too. I was unsure if they were going to get the number 1 seed. I thought maybe let it go into Milwaukee Juneau,
Yeah,
maybe
me too.
Regis.
Yep.
But they got the number 1 seed. So yeah,
They
there's a
did.
target on their back for a number of reasons.
100%. And they're going to take on the Blue Jays from Cambridge, which I think is a great story. 19-9 overall, tied for first in the Capital South Conference. And when you listen to Coach Alex Rainey talk about this Blue Jay team, he talks a little bit about being surprised and just a big fan of the guts that this team has.
We're a young team, and to be honest with you, we're kind of surprised we got here. We're the underdogs most of the year, coming in with 9 losses. I think we kind of got overlooked, and our guys kind of used that as fuel and played the underdog role. You got nothing to lose. Went out there, played extremely hard, especially against Darlington and Lemira. But a lot of sophomores, 2 juniors, 2 seniors, a great group of kids that just compete every time that they're on the floor. They just give it their all and pride ourselves on the defensive end and taking care of the basketball.
So a couple of things with them, Chuck. He played at Lake Mills under Coach Hicklin, and he played at UW-Platteville, went back to Lake Mills to be an assistant coach, and then took the job at Cambridge, and he brought a couple assistant coaches from Lake Mills with him. So that staff is a staff of guys from Lake Mills. You saw them play against Lemira. What did you think of that team? They only have 1 player in double digits, averaging double digits.
Hard-nosed, physical type team. Everybody thought Lemira was going to play Darlington all year long. We're going to play Darlington. And when Cambridge beat Darlington in the sectional semifinals, I warned people. I said, don't you think that just Cambridge picked off Darlington,
Right.
that they're going to just walk into that gym and Lemira's going to roll over them? You get to the sectional final, you throw out all the records.
All of it.
They got 9 losses. I didn't care. And they got down in that game in the sectional final. They got down 8-0 right off the start, and they were down by 5 late in that game. But what the toughness that Cambridge showed in that entire game, I don't put anything by them. Coach was surprised. I wasn't when I saw them play.
Well, Jakari Crawford, who comes off the bench for them, he talked about this kid will probably get free hamburgers and free haircuts and free popcorn in Cambridge for the rest of his life.
Yep.
He said he may have hit the biggest shot in basketball school history at Cambridge.
Probably a bank shot from 15 feet away with 3.6 seconds left. But that's what March Madness is, right?
100%.
Right? Those kind of shots go in this time of the year.
Oh, the people from Lemire are going to remember that shot for a long time as well.
Absolutely. He fell back as he hit the shot. I thought he might have been fouled. I called it as a foul initially, but no foul. But he hit the shot, banged in, and stunned.
Did Lemire get a shot at the end?
Yes, a 25-footer that just bounced out, which would have won the game.
Oh, my
In the
goodness.
sectional final. But Cambridge, the fans rushed the court. First time going to state, it was a big deal for them.
Oh, you bet. And that whole community will certainly be up in
Absolutely.
Madison today. Coach Rainey also talked about one of the things about this team is we have so many multi-sport athletes and how these kids learn how to compete in different sports. They have brought all that competitiveness with them, if it's football, if it's soccer, if it's hockey, whatever the sport is, but they have brought that competitiveness that they've learned in other sports to the basketball court.
And I think that's a big thing. You know, sometimes schools, you've heard this before, where coaches say, well, we want this kid just to play basketball or specialize.
Right.
But now in a smaller community like Cambridge, you got to play, the good athletes got to play all the
They do.
sports, right?
Yeah.
Make everybody better.
And I think they should.
Yeah.
I really do. Hey, we're going to get to a break. Other side of the break, we'll talk about the second Division IV matchup. This is the Boys Tournament Tip-Off Show presented by Current Electric only on My24. Welcome back to the Boys Tournament Tip-Off Show presented by Current Electric only on My24. I'm Mike McGivern alongside my co-host. He's Chuck Freimund, KFIZ Sports Director and the host of Football Friday Nights on Fox Sports 920. We're just minutes away from the first Division III tip-off. Let's highlight the second game tonight, Chuck. Milwaukee Juneau, first time to state, taking on the Ramblers from Eau Claire Regis, and you used to coach there.
Yeah, girls
that's
coach
awesome.
just out of college back in the 90s. What's the state championship in 93?
Hey, look at you.
Yeah,
That was a
yeah.
while ago.
Yeah.
Good for you. Great community up there. Let's start with the Pioneers from Milwaukee Juneau. First time to state. They are coached by Tori Johnson. Tori, big-time basketball player in our area years ago, went to Oklahoma State for a year, then transferred to UWM. And Tori talks a little bit about this year's team.
I don't know if you guys know, I played for Milwaukee Juneau also in class of 2003. So we lost in the sectional final. So, for me, it was definitely a big thing come for that game, to win that game, and to be a part of the WIAA state tournament, which I was never able to do as a player. And to be able to push the team to be able to, through adversity, to get to this point and be able to play in the state tournament is special.
He talks about adversity in the press conference. He talks about, look, coaching at Milwaukee Juneau, there are some adversity with kids trying to get to practice, making sure that their grades are good. And he has done a really good job over there. And their big time player is his son, Dooney. Dooney Johnson has committed to Gonzaga. He is averaging 28 a game. He's bouncy. Look, at Division IV, you don't see big-time athletes, Division I basketball players very often, but he's one of them.
And you don't see Gonzaga come in here very often.
No.
Mark Few, one of the top programs in the country, we know what they've done, come in here and recruit a kid from Milwaukee or the state of Wisconsin. But Dooney can play. Man, I was watching him play, and he's got game. And Juneau, another one of these teams, not a lot of athletic tradition there in the school. They did, Tori was talking about his team going to the sectional finals, but Dooney has brought things back, and there's an uprising of school spirit in Milwaukee Juneau these days.
So I coached his uncle, Ace Evans, at Greendale Martin Luther.
Okay.
And Coach Johnson talked about Dooney watching his uncle Ace and how hard he worked and what it was like to get to state and win a state championship. And he said, look, it had a lot to do with this kid getting in the gym a little bit more, getting more shots up, working on his game for sure. He also talked a little bit about Jaden Hardman, who is a 6'5" senior forward, averaging 18 a game. And he said, look, when teams pay so much attention to Dooney, Jaden is the kind of kid that could really go off, and he's carried us in a number of games.
Oh, sure. And they've had a successful season. You got a terrific 1-2 punch with both of these guys. And, man, like I said a little while ago, I thought that they would possibly be the number one seed in this one.
Right. And they beat, to get to state, Cedar Grove, Belgium, and Howard's Grove, two really good basketball teams this year.
Yep.
And so they had a tough road to get there, and they went and they beat them both. And it's interesting because when you go 26-1 overall and undefeated in the Milwaukee City Gold Conference, their only loss early, December 6th, to West Dallas Central. So it was game 1 or game 2 in their season. They have not lost since. And I had asked Coach Johnson, did you think that you could run the table after that? He started laughing. He said, absolutely not. But our kids from that loss to a really good West Dallas Central team took their game to a next level.
And I can tell you other schools in the sectional have been paying attention with Milwaukee Juneau.
100%.
And when the pairings came out last weekend, when the sectionals were all, nobody wanted to play Milwaukee Juneau because they knew about the Johnson kid, Dooney, what he could do.
Right. Well, they're playing against Regis. The Ramblers from Regis, 25-3 overall, 12-2 in the Clover Belt West Conference, tied for first with Fall Creek. And when we listen to Connor Miller, their head coach, talk, they've got a brother tandem, a senior and a freshman. And he talks a little bit about these two boys and what they mean to this team.
Blake's obviously been, he's been on the varsity program since a freshman, played a little bit as a freshman, but then really grew into his own as a sophomore. And then he's been the reigning player of the year in the conference his junior and senior year. And Bennett's, well ahead of him as a freshman. Bennett's already got a frame on him that he doesn't quite look like a freshman. He's a little bit taller, lankier. And then he's got the skill set package to go with it. And he's done an unbelievable job, in these tight, big-time environment games. Last night, he stepped up and played very well for us and hit some big buckets to help us separate a little bit. But, pretty neat to have two brothers. They're just a basketball family, and to have them be able to share this experience together is gonna be pretty cool.
When you listen to Coach Miller talk, he is a Regis grad, and he said, "Look, I understand the culture of this program, of this school, and this community," and he said it means so much to the alumni, to the people around this school, for us to get to state and to have a brother that's a senior, averaging just under 30 a game. I mean, big numbers for him, and his younger brother averaging 12. He said, look, their entire family comes to all these games, and it's just been a really fun year for us.
Oh yeah, and that's another school where the alumni come back and watch the team play, and there's families and families and families that go to Eau Claire Regis, and they've had a rich tradition. Billy Allman, their legendary Hall of Fame coach back in his day. So not surprising, Regis got a power in that Clover Belt, the Clover Belt West especially.
When we talked about the future of the program on that press conference, and you've got a freshman like Bennett Risler who's averaging 12 a game, and then a sophomore guard, a 6-foot guard by the name of DJ Cooper, and he kept saying, look, this kid for a sophomore is a straight up dog. He kept using that, and he said he's the kind of kid, if there's a loose ball, he's going to go get it. And if somebody's going to take a charge, he's the kid that keeps getting plays like that, keeps making plays like that to get our team better. He also talked about Joey Brommer, who is a kid who's going to defend Dewey. He always gets the best player no matter what size, but he's a kid that's going to get the best player, and he's asked, hey, I want that kid. Whoever their best player, the number one scorer is, that's the kid I want to guard. I'm not sure Joey has played against a kid like Dewey Johnson before. He's going to learn a little bit, I think, early in that game.
Yeah, and that sectional they're in, I mean, they're all tough, but that sectional they're in, really, really tough. First time Regis has been back to state since 2015, and I remember seeing them at state in 2015. They got beat by Dominican, beat them pretty good, but Regis, it's been a while. They've had some good teams, but they finally broke the door down for the first time in 10 years.
I feel good for Connor Miller being an alumni, and I think that means just a little bit more, right?
Does.
He understands. He's worn those colors for a while. We're going to get to a break. We're just minutes away from the First Division III state semifinal right here on My24. This is the Boys Tournament Tip-Off Show, as always, presented by Current Electric, only on My24. Welcome back to the Boys Tournament Tip-Off Show presented by Current Electric. I am Mike McGivern alongside my co-host. He's Chuck Freimund, KFIZ Sports Director and Football Friday nights on Fox Sports 920. So Chuck, tip-off is just a couple of minutes away. Let's talk a little bit about, this week for some of these schools, the pep rallies and the parade and all of that. Some of the schools who have been there before, maybe year 2 that they've been there, or they were there 2 years ago, understand that template, what time we're going to leave school, where, if they have to spend the night in hotels up there in Saint Croix, it's probably going to be doing that, right? Where we're going to stay, where we're going to eat, things like that. How much more difficult is it for teams that haven't been there for a long time or ever?
Well, I think it is, because schools that haven't been there before, they got to find out what's my connection down to the Madison area where I could practice maybe on a college floor somewhere.
100%.
They used to let you practice at the Kohl Center. They don't do that anymore. You got to find your own practice place.
30-minute run. You could get a 30-minute run and get a feel for it.
And it was usually the best practice of the year.
It was so fun.
Tempo.
I had been part of a couple of those, because you get to sit and watch the team a little bit you're going to play against. They would watch you.
Yeah.
We always had a chance to go over to Madison Edgewood, either high school or college.
That's what I was thinking.
And get on that court.
Yep.
We Madison Edgewood high school and college, very nice to us when we were up there.
So you got to know somebody who's got a key to the gym.
Correct.
The key is always
know where the
somebody's-
lights are.
Where the lights are, where the key is, and that. And it's funny with these schools, all these schools, it's just not about getting in the car and staying in a hotel. You got to find out where you're going to eat. Everything's all planned out. You meet, the coaches got to meet with the athletic directors, you meet with the WIAA, it's a busy week for all these schools and the administration when teams go to state, and especially for a first time when they haven't been there before.
When I was at Greendale Martin Luther, we talked as a coaching staff that after these kids did this parade a little bit through the school and got on the bus, we needed to get them focused. Get
Sure.
ready. Let's focus. We always want to eat 3 hours ahead of time. So the kids always want to go to like Pizza Ranch or something like
Sure.
that. Get as much food as they want, and that would be okay with us as long as it was 3 hours ahead of time. Hey, we've just got a couple of minutes before tip-off. Let's get some predictions from you, Chuck. Let's start in Division 3, Seymour against Saint Croix.
I love what Saint Croix Central brings to the table in the Middle Border Conference, tough conference, but I got to go with Seymour. I think Seymour just is going to win this game. It's going to be a close game. I like Seymour.
I would tend to agree with you, but I'll let you get out on a limb and make these predictions.
I'll be the bad guy.
Second game, I've already told you who I like in this one, who I'm kind of rooting for, being the old Metro guy that I am. But Lake Mills, the L-Cats against the Angels from St. Catherine.
Boy, when the private schools and the public schools face each other, it's always hard to go against the private schools because they usually have an edge. And I feel like they have an edge here with athletes. And I think St. Catherine's is going to get the job done here.
Boy, you know what? I'm hoping, but I might have to pick Lake Mills. I think Coach Hicklin and that staff have been here before. They have. He kept saying, "Look, Lamont Hamilton is going to be a problem," but we have watched them a lot because we kind of expected if we get to this point that we might play them. And when he made a comment like, we kind of expected to maybe play them, and we've played them in the past. We know kind of what they run. I think Lake Mills is going to give them all they can handle. Let's look at Division 4, the night games, if we can. Bonduel, the Bears, number 1 seed, going to play Cambridge, and wondering who you like in that one.
Even though Cambridge is on a run right now, they got to the sectional finals with the 9 losses. Got to go with Bonduel, the top seed right there. I think they're hungry. Last year, they lost in the state semifinal, or they lost in the state finals. Final year, Division 4. I'm going to take Bonduel here.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I do. I don't think they're just happy to be there right now. I think they have really kind of figured out, look, well, let's get one more step. Let's be that team in school history that gets over the top and wins the state championship. And I love the Cambridge story. I really do. And I think Alex Rainey and that staff has done a great job with them. But I think that they might be a year away from doing what Bonduel will I think do this year and get to that state final. Let's look at Milwaukee Juneau and Regis. You're a former coach at Regis.
Yes.
I'm a Milwaukee guy. Who do you like in that one?
Well, I told you a while ago that I always like to lean toward the private schools over the public schools. I'm going to go with Milwaukee Juneau here. I think Dooney Johnson's just an amazing player, and he's got a nice support group there. Other guys coming off the bench. I love Milwaukee Juneau to win this game.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't get the 1 seed, kind of like you. Chuck, you did a great job.
Appreciate it.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for having
much.
me.
Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Other side of the break, we are ready for tip-off. Division 3 game. Looking forward to all the games today. Stay right here on My24. This has been the Boys Tournament Tip-Off Show presented by Current Electric, only on My24.